there was one night that I was staying with my boyfriend at the time in his apartment, and I had my dad, it was like an old like Nokia phone. It was like before I had a smartphone. But I had it set, there was like this little light on the top that, because my dad had been sick and I'd been taking care of him for months before he died, that there was like a little red light that would pop up. And like his light, it would be a different light color when he called, because I wanted to make sure I didn't like miss his calls. And I was sleeping and I woke up and the phone was ringing and it was the red light on the top. And I went and I pick it up, it says my dad, and I was like, what the fuck? And I'm like half asleep, and I go and I pick up the phone, and it was my dad. And he was very angry with me. And he said, I left you in charge, and like, I told you need to take care of everyone, and like, where is your brother? Like, where is he?
Welcome. I'm here with Kelly Chase. Kelly, welcome.
Oh, Sean, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just had to apologize to Kelly because I burned about 52 minutes talking about all the crazy stuff my audience knows about me. So, Kelly, apologies for...
Oh, no, we burned 52 minutes, Sean.
I was talking more than you were talking, and I'm probably going to freak you out because you're going to be talking more than I am once we get started. And you'll be like, why is he not opening up his pie hole right now? Okay. How did you get into this topic? And by get into this topic, I don't mean when you started the podcast. Like, first, just tell the audience about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into how you started studying the phenomenon or how the phenomenon started studying you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a little of both, right? So my name is Kelly Chase. I was the host of the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast. That's where most people will probably know me from. I recently closed that podcast down, but it's on the same RSS feed, started a new podcast called Cosmosis, which is kind of an outgrowth of the docuseries that I wrote and executive produced that came out at the end of December. It's called Cosmosis, UFOs in a New Reality. You can find it on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, blah, blah, blah. If you go to cosmosis.media, you can find those links. So that's been a lot of my work over the last few years. I'm a relative newcomer to the field in a lot of ways. I really got started in August of 2021.
That's very interesting. Okay. And the reason I say that's very interesting is there were a slew of people who got started in that time period. Mm-hmm. So this podcast, I started in January 2022. I don't know if you know who Rich Geldrich is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He got started he's been interested in the topic for a very long time, but he was kind of started getting really involved in kind of early 2022. And there's a bunch of other people who started at around that point. I think the Good Trouble show probably got started in August of 2022. Anyway, there's a lot of people who had no interaction with this field until that sort of time span. Maybe it had something to do with the pandemic, maybe it, post-pandemic, but there's something synchronistic about that. I don't quite know what it is. It could just be sheer coincidence. Anyway, I just wanted to put that footnote in there and,
Oh, yeah. No, I've talked to it's crazy how many people I've met who in 2021 usually is the result of some sort of like a download or an anomalous experience or some sort of catalyzing event got started in 2021. And like you said, I don't know if it's just that, we had all just been like locked up at home long enough that things started getting weird.
Mine was like a cartoonish job loss, which I won't elaborate on this. Like it was just like, anyway, but that was like, I'm done. Like I'm doing something else. But to your point, like it could be some sort of traumatic event, any number of things. Anyway, please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, not at all. And I think that whatever the pandemic was, that was a very traumatic event. Like that was a traumatizing event for everyone. And Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what caused that, if they're related at all, but it is really interesting that 2021 was when it happened. So for me, what happened was we were kind of coming out of the pandemic year, and my family was going to go to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, which is a place that I'd gone a lot as a kid. And I'd actually seen a UFO there when I was a kid. And I'm not very good at taking time off. And so I was like, I'm going to have this week. What am I going to do with this week? And I was like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this UFO thing. Because at that same time, in April of 2021, there were a lot of stories coming forward. I believe that the Pentagon had finally said, like, oh, yeah, those Navy videos that were leaked in 2017 are real. And no, we don't know what they are. And the first UAP report was due to come out in the next couple of months. And so it was kind of everywhere at that time.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
So the UFO that I had seen when I was a kid, I was 13 years old, and I was just out on had like a beachfront house, and I was out on the deck one night looking at the stars, because I'm a suburban girl. You don't get a lot of stars in the suburbs where I was growing up. And I just had this thought in my head, which felt crazy at the time, which was that if I looked up right at that moment, that I would see a UFO. And so it turns out a lot of people have had that experience. But I looked up and I saw this little white light in the sky that was going along, but it was going like much faster than a plane. And all of a sudden it just did like 2 right angle turns and then just like out across the horizon faster than anything I had ever seen. And I ran inside and told my parents, and everyone just thought I was crazy. Like they thought I was like smoking weed. I'm like, you guys thought I was smoking weed out there? Like, come on. Like, so that was a whole thing. And so that week I spent really just thinking. I didn't see a UFO that weekend or anything, like, well, that week when I was there with my family in 2021, but I got really into this stuff and I started going down the rabbit hole. And what I realized was just like something real is going on here. And I could not figure out what it was but I was absolutely hooked. And so I got completely obsessed over the summer, and it was all I was doing. Like when I wasn't working, I was just reading anything I could get my hands on, watching anything I could get my hands on, trash, good stuff. I didn't know the difference. Like I was brand new. And I started getting really, really into it. And then in August, I had this experience on just like a random Saturday morning, and just sitting in my room. I went into my room and I sat on my big king size bed, and I had like all these books and notebooks and everything all surrounding me. And because I was getting ready to spend a day obsessing about UFOs again. And all of a sudden I had this really strange experience of being kind of outside of space and time. And it's really hard to describe. If people are interested in hearing about it in more depth, I did an episode called Through the Looking Glass on the UFO rabbit hole that you can find, where I spent literally months like writing it so I could get it right, because it's so hard to. Being outside of space and time is not something that's easy to describe.
Through the looking glass, through a glass darkly. That's interesting. Okay.
There you go. Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so, but long story short, it was a short experience, but it felt, when you're outside of space and time, you can get a lot done. And I ended up seeing all kinds of things, like my whole life, kind of the history of the planet. Like there's a lot of information about DNA and light and the nature of God and the nature of reality, most of which I couldn't remember the second it was over. But there were like a few key little things that I remembered very well that have ended up sticking with me. But the main thing is that as soon as it was over, I was a different person. Like I immediately started like sobbing, because I just realized that I was so different, that like I was engaged at the time. He's my husband now, bless him for sticking through all of this. But I realized that like I was not the same person that I was when I sat down on that bed, that all of my values had changed, that I suddenly felt like I had like a mission of like work that I was supposed to do in this world. And it all sounded very crazy at the time. Now that I've been doing this for a few years, I've met literally hundreds, if not thousands of people who have a very similar story. But that was what got me into it. I came out of that and I immediately outlined the first probably like 10 episodes of the podcast, and I got to work and I released it a couple months later, not really sure that anyone would ever listen to it or that it would ever go anywhere. And I was certainly no expert. I was brand new to all of this, so I didn't know what I was doing, but it kind of just took off from there.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Okay, there's so many questions I have. Okay.
Sure.
The three things that you did remember, or maybe it wasn't three, maybe there's a few more. Mm-hmm. Obviously, people should go to your podcast. And which episode is it again?
It's called Through the Looking Glass, My Initiation into the Anomalous.
Okay. So people should, because I'm probably going to lose half my audience right now because they're going to want to listen to that. But that's okay. Come back when you watch it. But of the things that you did remember, what are they?
So some of it I'll hold on to because they've been really important signposts for me. And what I don't want is to like say it out loud and then have somebody able to like tell me what it was. So, you know what I mean? But there was one that I will share and that I've talked about, and actually part 2 of that Through the Looking Glass series was I saw DNA. I saw the strand of DNA, and the DNA had this third strand like going up the middle of the double helix that looked like it was like pulsing like energy or like electromagnetism or something. Like it was some sort of like an energetic third strand going up the middle of DNA. And then it had these like weird, like circular structures around the outside of the double helix that had these little like candy cane structures hanging on them. And for some reason I remembered that, and I went, but everything I know about DNA, I learned in like high school biology, and I definitely forgot it. Like I know very little. But I went looking for images of that, and I was like, is that what DNA really looks like? Am I forgetting something? And no, that's not what DNA looks like. And so I was very intrigued by that, but I thought it kind of just, in some ways, it was kind of a way for me to not worry about what had happened to me, because I was like, well, look, I saw this DNA strand and it was totally screwed up. It wasn't right. And so none of the rest of it can possibly be like veridical. So I can just calm down and not worry about what happened to me. Right. And then about maybe 8 months after that experience, I was reached out to by this other experiencer, and his name is Tom Matte, Matte. And he has this really interesting story where he had like a complete psychotic breakdown that was like drug induced. He had been doing like a lot of cocaine and ended up in this sort of psychotic state for a couple of years, just kind of like flying all over the world, spending all of his money in and out of jail, in and out of rehab, like just absurd stuff. And when he finally got sober, he found that he had some abilities that he didn't have before, and that he had this holographic overlay on reality that he calls Upsight. It's a whole story. I could go on about that forever. But anyways, so his story, he wanted me to tell his story, and I was like very compelled by it, but I was also like, I can't tell this story. Like, this is not a story.
Yeah, well, it's like that's typically how a lot of these home abilities are unlocked. There's a disassociation, right? Right. But I was still very on in my journey. I was barely identifying as an experiencer at that point. And I was just like, I believe that this happened to you, but I also like can't tell this story and be taken seriously. But he really wanted me to tell his story. And so we continued talking, and he sent me this paper he wrote. And at the top of this paper is the DNA with the candy cane structures and like the third strand up the middle. It was like at the very, very top of that paper. And there were a bunch of other synchronicities with that as well. But so, long story short, I did end up telling his story. I ended up working with him. He went to the Institute of Noetic Science and was studied. And there's a paper coming out about it that actually showed that like this like Upsight that he calls it, this like holographic overlay that he has on reality, that like it is an anomalous and distinct brain state. So like they can't 100% prove it, but like there seems to be something to it. And so that was just like one of many bizarre things that happened. And then I found out there's a guy on Jesse Michaels, I forget his name, but he was like the blue collar guy who says that like NHI taught him physics
basically.
Yeah, I can see the guy's face. He's got like a beard, bald head. Like,
yeah, I forget his name,
Yeah.
but he talked about the third strand of DNA. And I have no idea if this is true. I actually just saw Gary Nolan. I didn't ask him, but he says that Gary Nolan is, along with other people, is aware of this third strand of DNA and that they're actually working on a paper about it. And so, like, that kind of stuff.
When I spoke to Gary Nolan, or when I interviewed Gary Nolan, one of the topics we discussed, it's funny, the two things you just mentioned were like two of the three topics we discussed. So the first, we talked a little bit about paranoid schizophrenics and how they have less of a filter on the world. The second thing we talked about was speciation, which is the development of like a separate, effectively species in the human population. So that's, again, the synchronicities happen like butter with me. So it's not unusual. Anyway. Those were two of the topics. The next thing you'll say is probably the third, but I can't remember what the third one was until somebody.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's just a good example of like the few things that I had. There's still a few that I don't really know what they mean, and I'm holding on to those. But that's like an example of something that I remembered afterwards that ended up being this kind of signpost that led me to a bunch. And I don't feel like that story's done with me either. There's still weird stuff happening around that.
Okay, the next question I had was, you said that it revealed like a mission. Do you feel comfortable talking about that at all, or is that something you want to keep to yourself?
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, I always, to say I feel comfortable talking about it, it's a stretch, but I will talk about it. I think that I was actually talking to this researcher and philosopher, Kim Engels, about this recently, and to a few other people about like how weird it is to like feel shame about that, but that like there is this like that's the thing that like and it took me a long time to say it out loud publicly, and I still have this like weird shame about it. This idea of like feeling like you have a mission, and the only reason that I feel at all okay saying it is because I've met so many other people who have had similar experiences and who have a similar sense and who are equally kind of like horrified and ashamed that that's how they feel and that that's what they think.
Well, so how do I say this? Would you say that you have a mission and you know what it is, or would you say you have a mission but you have no idea what it is?
I think that I have a mission and I understand what I'm supposed to bring to it, but I don't understand what the whole thing is, and that I think that I get things that happen and synchronicities that happen and downloads that happen along the way that give me like enough information to sketch out the next couple months or the next couple of years to kind of understand the shape of it, but that I don't totally know what I'm doing. Like I don't.
So similar to you, I have like this strong sense that I'm supposed to do something important, but my entire life has been one frustration after another that like I have no idea what it is. It's more about in opposition, like I don't want to do that. Like I hate doing that, right? And sometimes life just kind of kicks you in the, you know what, and kind of gets you back on track. But I don't have the sense that I know what it is. But anyway, going back to you, you kind of do, not 100%. What is that mission? At least for the next few months or years.
Right. I mean, I think that like the biggest and most important piece of it, and I think everyone has this mission, is to bring the best parts of myself and the best version of myself to this work. And that is like, I think the thing that I am good at is that I'm good at diving into the deep end of really complex information and coming back out and being able to communicate about it in a way that is grounded and relatable, and that like I'm a good communicator. I have a good combination of being a good communicator and being someone who's willing to go really, really deep into the weird. And that like when I allow myself to do both of those things and I show up as the best version of myself as I can, that I am able to create value for other people by doing that. I'm able to like help, not everyone, but there's like certain people, and we all have, but I think that that's kind of everybody's mission in a way, is like, what is the thing that you're best at? And can you show up to it? Can you show up to something, a cause greater than yourself with that and give it your best? I think that that's what we're all here to do. And yeah, and so like I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be and doing what I'm supposed to do, but I also often feel like I have no idea what I'm doing because it gets weirder all the time and it really challenges me. And I think that when you show up like that for something that's hard and that's bigger than you and you just try to do your best, that like that level of challenge is kind of always going up. It's like a video game and every level is a little bit harder than the last one. So I never feel like I totally have like a 30,000 foot view on what I'm doing. It's kind of more of like a moment by moment thing. And I don't think I'm like some sort of like chosen one or messiah or anything like that. Like I said, I think everyone has that purpose. I just was shown that purpose very, very quickly and aligned with that purpose very, very quickly, not by virtue of my own character, but as virtue of like something reaching in from the outside and being like, you're supposed to be over here now. And that's what happened. And it's been a very weird thing to come to terms with.
Yeah. And there are weird things that happen when you do some of these things. I'll give you a quick example. I'm sure you know James Ian Doley, right?
Oh yeah, I love James.
He had a dream he was on my show.
Oh really?
And I messaged him the next day inviting him to be on my show.
Oh,
like
awesome.
That's the kind of stuff that happen. Like that's the kind of synchronicities that happen. But again, I don't pretend to. I feel like anything I do, it's going to be a struggle. Like I got to work 10 times as hard to get the same result in literally anything. But yeah, I'm still trying to figure out that purpose. Again, I kind of have a sense of what it is. I think it's about just exposing truth, no matter where it lies, no matter how horrible or despicable it is. And I think that makes me dangerous to some people. Because if it's true and, if you did something that was unspeakable, you need to take responsibility for it.
Right.
So, okay, anyway, going back to your journey. So you had this experience where you're kind of out, you saw yourself outside of space-time. Were there any other insights that you had there that you can talk about?
Sure. I mean, I think I touched on the fact that it really like realigned all of my beliefs and values on a really core level. So I had grown up, I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic schools all the way through, but my family was never like that serious about it. And I was by the time I was an adult, I was a pretty solid atheist and a materialist, which is actually crazy when I look back because I've had anomalous experiences throughout my entire life. And it's so weird to look back and realize, I mean, I lived in a house that was haunted when I was a kid. I've had precognitive events kind of throughout my life. I got a phone call from my dad like 3 months after he died, giving me very specific information about someone else that turned out to be 100% true. And all of those things I was just sort of able to like compartmentalize and decide that like it wasn't really happening or that wasn't real or.
Do you feel comfortable talking about that specific experience?
About my dad? Yeah. So my dad died when I was 20 and it was very sudden. He got a really, really aggressive form of cancer. He's only 50 and, he fought it.
What did he do for a living?
He was a psychiatrist.
No, like government ties or anything like that?
No, I would not him. No.
There's context. The reason I'm asking. So there was an interview like a week ago between Tucker Carlson and Kurt Weldon. You know who Kurt Weldon was?
Mm-hmm.
So Kurt Weldon said, yes, there is a weapon that the CIA has that causes aggressive forms of cancer. Like he said that flat out.
Yeah, I saw that.
Like it's real. Like and the reason that I'm saying that is he was going to, I think, chair the Armed Services Committee. So he would be in a position to know. Okay, but anyway, that's why I'm asking all the creepy questions. So it sounds like it's not the cancer gun. So please.
I would be surprised. Although my dad had a lot in his past that surprised me, so who knows? But yeah, it was called anaplastic carcinoma. So it was thyroid cancer, but like an extraordinarily rare form. Like people don't usually, like if you get cancer, thyroid cancer is one that's like better
It
to
spreads
get.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, better? It's better
Well,
to get?
it spreads, but most people don't die of thyroid cancer, especially if you catch it like stage 1, like he did. But he was dead in a few months, and it happened like really, really fast. And so I was really messed up over it. I was only 20, and my dad was like my favorite person in the world. And so there was one night that I was staying with my boyfriend at the time in his apartment, and I had it was like an old like Nokia phone. It was like before I had a smartphone. But I had it set, there was like this little light on the top that, because my dad had been sick and I'd been taking care of him for months before he died, that there was like a little red light that would pop up. And like it would be a different light color when he called, because I wanted to make sure I didn't like miss his calls. And I was sleeping, and I woke up and the phone was ringing, and it was the red light on the top. And I went and I pick it up. It says my dad, and I was like, what the fuck? And I'm like half asleep, and I go and I pick up the phone, and it was my dad. And he was very angry with me. And he said, I left you in charge, and like, I told you need to take care of everyone, and like, where is your brother? Like, where is he? And it's my brother's business, so I won't go into all of that. But he was going through something really rough at the time, and I ended up like going and finding him the next day, and I hadn't realized how bad things had gotten for him. And so I had that call with my dad, and I woke up the next morning, because it's weird that I would even go back to sleep after that. And so I woke up the next morning, and I thought it was a dream, because of course, like, of course it is, right? Like, of course it's a dream.
What time did it happen?
I mean, of course at 3 a.m, because like, of course it did, right? And
the witching hour. Yeah.
Yeah, it was sometime in the 3 o'clock hour. But it was weird because like when I dream, I rarely dream of it being like it looked like the room. It wasn't like I woke up in some weird room and I just knew it was my room, like how it is in dreams. And so anyways, long story short, I just like really blew it off and thought, like, I didn't even look at my phone. I just like decided it was a dream. But I ended up like later that day or the next day or something, looking at my call logs and realizing that like I had gotten a call from my dad's number at 3 a.m. And I called my stepmom and asked like, hey, like, what did you happen to call? Because she still had his phone, because we had kept it on, because like we would still call him sometimes and listen to the voicemail just to hear his voice. And she told me that she had turned it off finally, like the day before. And so which didn't make any sense. But I think what I told myself over the years was just that it was some sort of something that happened while they were turning off the line that caused his phone to call my phone.
Did you ask her to turn it back on?
No, it never got turned back on after that.
Okay.
So I just told myself, but like, I don't think that story makes a whole lot of sense now, especially because like when I did go and like find my brother, and he wasn't in a bad way. Like I had to help him.
Yeah.
So
No, I don't think you're making that up. I think there are things we don't understand that can, manipulate energy in different ways. And the result was helpful, right? It was positive, right?
yeah, it was really traumatizing at the time because I missed my dad so much, and he was so mad at me, like on that call, like he was so angry. But I'm glad it happened, because I needed to go. Like, I needed to go figure out what's going on with my brother.
And what do you think that was? Do you think that was your dad? Do you think it was something else? And the reason I said it was helpful is I'm leaning more in the direction that it was really your dad. But there are instances where it might not be.
I mean, I think now it took me a long time to get there. Like, I didn't think it was him for the longest time. And I'm to the point now where I think probably it was. I just didn't have the worldview to support it. And like, when you don't have the worldview to support it, you just kind of like, I'm just going to throw that away and not worry about it. And there was a lot of stuff, like my dad had just died and I was in my early 20s. I was very angsty. Like, there was a lot of stuff I was trying to just not deal with. And so, that just add that one to the pile. Right. But yeah, I think it was him. And he had told me before he died that like, if there was a way for him to like contact me afterwards, that he would. Mm-hmm. And so like, I don't know, maybe it was him.
Interesting. Okay, keep going. I didn't mean to.
No,
So there's a lot of paranormal kind of experiences that you had along the way that you, in retrospect, were more significant than you had thought.
yes, yeah, absolutely. But like I said, I didn't have that worldview, even though I should have. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance going on there. But when I had that experience in August of 2021, I think that like it obliterated that materialist worldview for me immediately. Like I was outside of it and I saw and I understood in that moment, even though it's hard to hold on to when I'm back here, but like I knew in that moment like what reality was. And I knew that like there was a God, and like I knew that I was loved, and I knew that, and I was shown very specifically that even though I had like, you know, not the easiest life, that everything that had happened for like very, very specific reasons, and that it was to bring me to this place. And like, and I saw kind of, even in the things that felt like the worst moments of my life, an endless love and compassion in the things that had happened to me, because I knew that it was all ultimately done for me and not to me. And that like now it was time for the next step. And I let go of a fear of death, and I let go of a fear of, you know, I think I'd like never really truly been myself before. I was always kind of trying to be some version of myself that was going to be more acceptable or like work in some way, in a way that I felt like the real me wouldn't. And I think that I came out of that experience with an entirely different set of values, an entirely different worldview, an entirely different confidence in myself and belief in myself. And it changed everything. It just changed everything about me. It was the weirdest and craziest thing. And to have that happen so instantaneously, although I feel like really sure in a lot of ways, like in my body, I feel sure about a lot of the things that I just said. Intellectually, it also kind of instilled this humility that really balances that, because like when you have everything that you believe about the world changed in just a matter of a few moments, it's really hard to like be real sure of yourself again. You know what I mean? So, you know, I realize I'm always kind of like one data point or one super weird experience away from kind of like throwing everything else out and starting over. And so, but yeah, I mean, it overwhelmingly was an extraordinarily positive experience.
Okay. So you had that experience. Then what?
Then I just started the podcast. And I think it took me about a year to even really, even though everything about me had changed and everything about what I was doing changed, it still took me at least a year to even get to the point that I was really able to start grappling with what had happened to me and what it meant and whether it was even real. I think that in the same way that I kind of like ignored the phone call from my dad, I kind of ignored that this had happened to me and that it changed everything. Like I was just like, well, you know, I do get into some weird hobbies sometimes, and like just sort of like wrote it off in some weird way. But after about a year, it became really hard to contain that anymore. And just synchronistically, a lot of people came into my life and things happened in my life that helped me kind of come around to what had happened to me and to begin to make sense of it and to begin to make more space for that worldview. I will say, in some ways, I don't know that I'm fully there even now. Like there's a part of me, I think that like a lot of the drive behind a lot of the work that I do is to like intellectualize a lot of these things. And that's an attempt for me to kind of like get my arms around it, and that like I'm going to find some kind of an answer that's going to make it all add up in some way. And I think that there's a way in which I still kind of reject the anomalous, even as it like infuses every part of my life. There's something about me that won't totally, that's like always the ultimate skeptic. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that for the work that I'm doing, it's important, but it is like, I do end up living in this kind of like conflicted state. Like there are people who think I'm some sort of like, that I'm like one of these like all love and light people who thinks like the phenomenon is all love and light and that's all that it, like I could not be further from that. Or somebody who thinks that like, I don't know, I think some people like read, when I talk about this kind of stuff, they read into what I'm saying a kind of like belief or a zealotry or something that I simply don't have. That like there's no one who's more skeptical of my own experiences or my own thoughts than I am. And so I kind of live in this in-between state. But in the meantime, this has become my whole life and my whole world. I'm really excited about it. And I really love the work that I'm doing, and I love the people that I work with. And, it gets dark sometimes, but I like this version of myself better.
In terms of when you started getting into this field, how long has your podcast been run? Both podcasts, I guess, combined. How long have they been running? How many years?
I started in November 2021. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So not very long.
And then at what point did people start inserting themselves into your life? Let's just say. It's a very not so subtle way of asking a less subtle question.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I know where you're going with that. It happened really fast. In some ways not okay, so probably for the first 6 to 8 months, there weren't a ton of people listening. I started November of 2021, but by the end of summer 2022, it had really started to take off. And by the end of 2022, it was the biggest UFO podcast in the world, globally. Except for probably if you can't count coast to coast or on radio or whatever, but of the actual podcast, it was the biggest UFO podcast on the planet for a while there. And so kind of in the summer through the end of that year, when it started to really take off, was when people started showing up.
And did it seem organic at first?
Yeah, it seemed very organic because of course. And all you just I was because I was on UFO Twitter at the time, and I was, doing my little podcast and hoping somebody might notice it someday, and I was mostly lurking. I didn't really talk to almost anyone in the community. And then people started reaching out, and he's become one of my best friends and collaborators is J. Christopher King reached out really early and asked for me to co-host an event, a conference he was doing in New York, which was a huge deal for me at that point. But then that kind of got me out there. And then all of a sudden, started meeting a lot more people, and it all seems very organic at first, right? Because I want to talk about UFOs and all of this stuff with people. I want to get to know people. But yeah, it seems just very friendly. And I think in a lot of times, it is, if not friendly, at least mostly benign. Kind of depends on the situation. But then there is that weird moment when you realize are half my friends intelligence, or is it 75%, or is it how many is it? And that's a weird transition to go through, to first realize that that's a thing, to realize that it's happening in your life, to realize that you have to second guess kind of any new connection that comes through the door and what it is that they're actually after. And and that's me. I don't have any secrets. I don't have classified information. I don't have, what I mean?
The issue
I can be open.
The issue is mosaic theory, right?
Mm.
And there are things that are often classified, but you can gain access to them unwittingly through open source intelligence, right? And people who are good at pattern recognition figure things out faster than most, right? You're not always going to be right. Sometimes you can, particularly intelligent people can over-engineer really, really good, solid descriptions. By the way, I have a spider. Just.
Oh, I saw it.
Yeah, he's just hanging out. We don't kill spiders here because spiders eat bugs, so they're welcome here. So, and I'm not too squeamish with spiders.
It's an unlimited hangout. Spiders welcome.
That's right. That's a very good. Very apropos, let's just say. But you're not associated with this theory, but I'm just going to throw this out there because it's my theory and it's just a theory. But we were talking about, before we started recording, about the Malmgren interview, right? And immediately, within less than 24 hours, his Wikipedia page was removed. Chris Mellon's Wikipedia page was removed. Elizondo came out outraged that the Wikipedia pages were removed. The Good Trouble Show came out attacking Susan Gerbic. Jesse Michaels came out defending the podcast. Now, keep in mind, this is like Malmgren died 2 months ago. Okay. But the podcast was published, just then. And then also, the very next day or 2 days later, I can't remember which, John Ramirez shows up after a long absence.
Yeah. I love when a player's put back on the board.
Yeah, shows up on Chris Lado's podcast. All of these things are correlations. That's 100% the case. However, if you are running an intelligence operation, it's not possible for you to suddenly yank off somebody's Wikipedia page. Like, oh, there's a podcast that just showed up. Yank all the pages. It has to be coordinated well in advance.
Right.
So my theory of what happening here is the fuss is the tell and the timing is the tell. And what I think is happening is there's a lot of people who are working in intelligence and are also, let's call them blue bloods, right? I don't mean blue bloods from like hybridization or anything like that. I just mean people who are elite adjacent. And right now, trust in elites is at an all-time low. There are literally people murdering them because the justice system doesn't adequately handle this stuff, which we don't condone here, obviously, but we do understand. So I'm talking about like a Mangione, that sort of thing. So what do you do to overcome those twin challenges? I.e., like a lot of these people are representing the government, again, all-time or affiliated, were affiliated with the government at one point. Low trust, etc., and also extremely low trust in elite. Well, you make them into messiahs, right? By taking down their Wikipedia pages. And then you have all this noise around, oh, isn't this terrible? This is horrible. This is censorship. When in the meantime, your proxies just took down your webpage to make you more relevant with the population. Like, oh, he's being persecuted. He's now, and I'm not saying Chris Mellon's behind it, right? But I am saying whoever is running this show wants him to appear as a martyr. They also want to amplify the message of Malmgren. So by removing his Wikipedia page, it just amplifies, like the intelligence community is finally learning, right? They're learning that if you overreact to things, you're going to get attention. So let's use this to our advantage for once, as opposed to, when somebody says something on UFO Twitter, they're suddenly attacked. I'm like, okay, we're over target on this one.
Right. I mean, I think I agree with you completely. And this is how the game is played. Like, this is how they do it. It's like pro wrestling, right? There's like a hero and a heel, but like they all work for the same people. And these heroes and heels are kind of like, this is the device by which, because people identify with these personalities. And so this is the device by which the lore and all of this and these different ideas and theories are inserted into the conversation to do different things. Because like, not only have they like, now are they like martyrs, but like now they're like, we're fighting for, openness and like the people and like democracy of information and like, right? Like, because that's what they're all about. And like, and now that gets to be like the flag that they fly. Plus, everybody's going to go watch Jesse Michaels' interview. By the way, I think Jesse Michaels is a great guy. I don't think that he's doing this. But like, that's the problem of getting sucked into this world where you're just like, you've got these people in the intelligence community who are like, I'm going to give you this story, or you're going to get to be the person who tells this, like this amazing story about JFK and UFOs and all this. Like, you're going to get to bring this to the world. But like, now you're
associated with it.
Yeah. And now you're in the assembly line of disinformation, and you didn't like sign up for it.
Wittingly or unwittingly, right?
Right.
Like
I think most people are unwitting, would be my guess. I think.
But there was a point at which he was. I think Jesse was addressing that. It's like people like, attack me on Twitter for like having like this extraordinary access to these people and this and that. But I just did the work. I just reached out and made the phone call. And I sat there kind of laughing, like, Jesse, like,
I don't doubt that he did the work, but there are a lot of people who did the work and no one answered their phone call. Like,
he had Grush on before people knew who Grush was.
right.
Remember that? Like, yes, he did the work, but there is someone in the background, again, wittingly or unwittingly, that's feeding him, like, or providing him with this extraordinary access, right? I mean, he's definitely doing the work. There's no doubt about it. But, and again, I don't mean to pick on him because all the people that he's had on, there are people I've reached out to multiple times, 6 ways to Sunday through 7 different routes. They will not talk to me. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they choose their people, right? And I think a lot of people don't know that they got chose, right? They don't know that.
Yes. Yeah. Again, this is. I think he does extraordinary work. There's no shit on him. Good for him.
Yeah, I love Jesse, to be honest. Like, I think he's great.
I'm glad he's getting. I'm glad like he's doing really good work with what he's had. But to claim that it's all like, there's a hidden hand for sure.
There absolutely is. And I agree with you. And I read the whole Wikipedia thing the exact same way. Like, and there's lots of examples of this. And I'll try not to be, I try not to.
And by the way, I don't think he specifically is behind it at all.
No, not at all.
I think somebody in his network just knew when it was going to drop because they keep in touch with him. And then somebody behind that orchestrated everything around it so that it would get maximum amplification.
No, 100%. And that's what it's about. Like, that's why part of the reason I've had to like back away from disclosure and all of that is because it's just this like rolling news cycle of stories that are just directed at the UFO community, right? And then all of the content creators who need to be like relevant, right? Then you've got to jump on all this. Now you're making content about it. Now you've joined the circus. And like, you didn't even know that you would join the circus. And shout out to my friend Daniel Elizondo, because that's his phrase. But one that I'll say out loud, because I think that this was done so sloppily and in public that it's hard to deny, but this stuff happens all the time. So like I want to say it was like around January-ish last year, Sean Kirkpatrick had already left Arrow, right? He was gone. He was on to other things. And yet all of a sudden he's putting out these like articles and papers and making all these comments, right? And then, like you were saying about John Ramirez earlier, and I was like, I love when they put a player back on the board because it's interesting whenever that happens, right? And like, so Sean Kirkpatrick puts that out, and then out of nowhere, here comes Travis Taylor, who we hadn't heard from in quite some time, to come and to just like annihilate. He was just like eviscerating Sean, just going after him. And, the meat and potatoes UFO crowd is like, yeah, Travis, you get him, you tell him. And it's like hero and heel stuff, right? Because they're like, boo, Sean Kirkpatrick, like, yay, Travis Taylor. Except that like Travis Taylor, it then comes out like around that same time, there were some emails leaked that showed that like he and Brandon Fugel were involved in basically killing the first version of the legislation, the Schumer amendment that was supposed to come out like because of eminent domain stuff. And
the imminent domain stuff was there as a poison pill.
100%. That was the whole. Yes, that's why it was there. 100% agree. And but then the other thing is that like for Travis Taylor to be criticizing Sean Kirkpatrick when the first Nothing Burger UFO report that we got was written by Travis Taylor, like he invented the thing that Sean Kirkpatrick then went on to do. Like he was like that was the blueprint. And so like, this stuff happens all the time, but it creates these like narratives and it gives you somebody to be like, boo, we hate this person. And like, yay, we like this other person. And it's a mess.
By the way, that's very important that you raise that. Again, another pseudo synchronicity, not super strong, but Travis Taylor, I've never been able to get to my show. And I am 1 degree of separation from him in not hundreds of ways, but tens of ways, right? And I'll tell you exactly what the degrees of separation are. His publisher is my publisher, okay? I've interviewed folks on the podcast who are collaborators with him on like writing projects. I've interviewed him for my publisher on camera, like David Morehouse, right, is on Beyond Skinwalker. He's been on a few episodes. He knows Travis, asked Travis personally to appear in my show. And Travis like, yeah, sure. Never, not once. So again, no shade on anybody. I would still love to have Travis on my show, but he has a role to play. And It's
that's the thing.
not by
Yeah.
being on my show, right? Like I
Yeah,
would
he's
ask
not
him
a bad
about the
guy.
1.6 gigahertz signal, right? Like Delta operators have Iridium cell phones, like sat phones that operate on that frequency, right? Like that's literally the frequency they use. It's a kind of classified military communication network frequencies, but they make a spectacle. So I would ask questions like that, which like kind of put people in really awkward places, right? So I get it, but to say that people don't work, they got to do the work. Yeah, that's horseshit. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm here to say that firsthand. So anyway, there's definitely, I think your wrestling analogy is very good. Very good. So where were we going with this? Because I'm trying to be positive about people. Like everybody's playing a role, and that's the way you have to look at it. They have a role to play. They have a job to do. No shade on them, but the effects are obvious.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. I'm not somebody who necessarily thinks that like everyone in the intelligence community is evil or that like, I even in that story, I'm not trying to say that like Travis Taylor is secretly a bad guy. I'm just saying that like Travis Taylor and Sean Kirkpatrick and all of these people are on the same team.
They're on the same team.
If you actually pay attention, like they're all, and and they're controlling the narrative, which is literally what the intelligence community is supposed to do, is to like control what people think and the information that they have access to, and specifically around information that could be destructive or destabilizing to the state. Like that's what they do. And most of the time we're really fine with them doing it because they end up dealing with a lot of stuff that most of us don't want to think about, you know what I mean, or deal with. And so, and I recognize that the reason I sleep safely at night is because there are people who are willing to do things that I would not be able to do or would not be willing to do. And that like we owe those people something. So this isn't like an attack on
with one exception. And that's when they lie to the American people.
Yeah. I mean,
like that's unforgivable. That's just well, there's certain things I guess it's okay to lie about the American people, like which weapons program you're working on, things like that. That's fine because you don't want your adversaries to know that. But when you're talking about the nature of reality, that's unforgivable. It's unforgivable.
I agree. I think the problem is that like it's all so tied up that it's hard to like separate it. And I agree with you. I'm not okay with people lying about it. I'm just saying I can see how you could get involved in it and not necessarily be like a wretched human. That I think it's complicated, but.
Well, have you ever seen, what's the movie called? Not movie, it's a series. Why can I not remember it? It's the one with the guy calls himself Heisenberg. It's all about crystal meth.
Oh, Breaking Bad. Yeah.
Breaking Bad. That's what it is. You start out, like, I'm going to die anyway. I need to provide for my family. And then with each decision, you go along a path that takes you closer to hell, for lack of a better word. So these people have made choices during their careers that slowly and methodically they've corrupted themselves. Yeah. So, I don't want to judge because certainly, like, I trained the U.S. military before they went and killed 5 million people, right? And I trained them by beating them at their own game. Do I have responsibility in that? Yeah, probably a little bit. Yeah. And like, do I sleep at night? Yeah, I do, because I thought at the time I was doing the right thing. Now, not so sure, right? Now I may have supported kind of a modern Rome that is amoral and, vicious. And like, I don't think we're the good guys anymore. And after kind of the whole pandemic experience and things like that, why would I? So anyway, I'm getting far afield.
No, I think that's an important point. And I think, it is really complicated. And I guess I will say is that like, for me, something that's stressful for me to watch unfold daily, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is just that like there is almost no community on the planet that should have the same, that should have as much skepticism about the intelligence community than the UFO community. And yet somehow we've gotten to this place and like, listen, they're very good at their jobs, because now we've gotten to this place where like, if it doesn't come from them, like it's not real and we shouldn't be talking about it. And like they've controlled the narrative like to that extent. And that's a very crazy thing to see. And then people get like so upset about it. And it's like, no, this is what I'm not saying it's okay, but I am saying that like, if you believe the prostitute loves you, then like, that's a little bit on you. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, you have to understand that, yeah.
The UFO community is that way, but literally every other community on the planet is, if the U.S. government says it's true, it's not true.
Right.
And you know what? Like the U.S. government 100% deserves that. 100%. Yeah. I don't believe, like, I need to verify everything the U.S. government says and does, because, you know, like, I'll give you an example. And I'm going to use some coded language here because it'll get demonetized if I say it the wrong way. But, you know, in the beginning of the outbreak, let's call it, people were like, hey, you know, they're like, oh, it's, you know, there's a penguin or that ate a bat, and then people in a wet market who are, you know, borderline peasants are eating penguins, and that's how they got it, right? And you're like, well, like right across the river, there's the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's the only level 4 biocontainment facility in all of China, and it focuses on novel coronavirus research. Like, maybe it's a lab leak? Racist! You know, yeah. And you're like, what? Racist? And it's just like, so, and then literally like 2 years later, they're like, yeah, it was probably a lab leak. Are you kidding me? Like, you gaslit your entire population, called them racists. Like it's just, I don't believe a damn thing you're. Oh, and by the way, this guy Peter Daszak, who had EcoHealth, was funded by Fauci, who was the guy also in charge of the messaging and the cover up, right? Who funded, between NIH and USAID, they funded EcoHealth, which in turn funded this lab that developed a pathogen, you know, that most pathogens attack the young and the old. This one only attacks the old. Wait, doesn't China have like one of the worst demographic aging populations in the world? That's kind of weird. Isn't everybody kind of looking toward like a pension crisis in the future, right? Because of an aging population, there's not enough native-born population to support them. Oh, wow, our borders are wide open now with plenty of young people to support an aging population. Oh, it just seems like just so random. And you just see all these patterns, and it's like there's a hidden hand behind all of it. I don't pretend to know what that hidden hand is, but everybody's lying. Yeah. Every single person. The latest administration comes in, we're going to expose the massive compromat network that we have for our elites, right? Where we put them in compromising situations so that we can control them, because they're all psychopaths. How do you control psychopaths? Well, you compromise them, right? So we're going to come, here's your, we're going to open up the information. And then sure enough, they just show a photo op with a bunch of guys and women with binders, and still nothing's come out. One of the witnesses was mysteriously hit by a bus, didn't die. But don't worry, she, unalived herself. Like, what a coincidence. Really crazy. So I think it doesn't, at this point, the government has so little credibility on either side that it doesn't matter if they come out. Whatever they say will not be believed. And I don't think they have much time left in terms of stability. Maybe 15, 20 years best.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think things are falling apart. And I think, this whole Wikipedia thing is actually, going back to that, a really good example of like what the problem is. Because what I think is so, like, honestly, kind of amusing about the Wikipedia thing is, first of all, just how I agree with you. I think this whole thing is orchestrated and an intentional narrative that's being developed. But it's also like, well, gosh, wait till they find out how literally all other information on the internet works, because this is not strictly a Wikipedia problem. No,
it's Reddit, it's 4chan, like the 4chan, it's fully.
It's the Google algorithm. It's everything. Like,
yeah.
Like people do not understand the extent to which the information that they are just mainlining into their brain box every day has been carefully curated and orchestrated and put together to weave all of these narratives that usually have very little to do with what's actually going on, but give people something to talk about and think about while whoever's doing whatever can do what they want, just really without any kind of oversight. Like the press is a joke,
Yeah. Oh, the press has long lost it's almost humorous to watch them talk about things, because it's like, I'll give you another example, and this is very non-consensus. And again, I don't have a strong feeling about it. It's just, other than it's just a fact. So the narrative is that we never found weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, right? You agree that's what the official story is. Well, we did.
Oh,
and most people don't. And I usually refer people to a New York Times article in October 2014. It's called something like The Secret Casualties of Iran's Chemical Weapons Program. Now, we didn't find any nuke stuff as far as I know. But the one question I always ask, and by the way, that's kind of a story, and it's downplayed. It's like, well, it was an old program. It wasn't a new program, so it doesn't count. You ask ChatGPT about it, like, did we find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? They'll say, no, we didn't find. I'm like, what about this article? Oh, well, it's an old program. It's a blah, blah, and it just breaks, right? Because it can't lie, but it can't. You just feed it this New York Times article, and it's like, oh, well, and it tries to classify it as something else. But chemical weapons are clearly. But anyway, we found 2,400 sarin-tipped rockets, right? Which, like, a teaspoon of that stuff would kill you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason we never allowed that narrative. And by the way, I also know an EOD specialist personally, like a friend I went to high school with, who destroyed some of these munitions.
Wow.
Right. So we did find them. Now, was there an active program? Probably not. But these were the stockpiles that we never, like, successfully destroyed. Right. Old aging weapons. And that was the narrative. It was kind of like, oh, well, they're old and aging and they weren't really effective, so they don't count. Right. So, and it's just like, okay, well, here's a teaspoon of the stuff that came off that rocket. Does this count? Right. And it'd be like, oh, well, I don't want to, So the point is, I kind of asked myself, why would they want, like the Bush administration, why would they, because they knew this in the Bush administration, why would they not want that story to get out? Right? Because they were getting pummeled over it. Oh, this is a false war. We got involved because of this. And the best answer that I came up with was, if you have a bunch of these chemical weapons storage facilities peppered all throughout Iraq, and you found some of them, but you didn't find all of them, would you want to broadcast that they had weapons of mass destruction if you hadn't found all of them? And the answer would be no, you wouldn't. You would just deny that we ever found anything. But, like, that's the sort of thing that it just drives me crazy to to see that stuff. It's just this, like, false narrative. And I've also had, secondhand interactions with government officials in, like, had nothing to do with this topic, but in, like, professional settings. And the company tries to do the right thing. They reach out to, say, the chief of staff of the FDA. Okay. I'm just putting it out there, Dr. Gottlieb. And, we were going to do I'm deliberately, intentionally not saying the name of the company. We're going to do something positive because we were taking a lot of flack for the effects of a particular product. And their chief of staff said, don't do that. Don't do that. Just wait. So then this piece of shit comes out before we get our announcement out, attacking the company, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, he's on Pfizer's board. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it fits. It fits. So particularly related to the prior topic that we were talking about. But the people who are in charge are almost universally corrupt. They're controlled through compromat, either Epstein or P. Diddy or whoever. And I think in terms of this particular topic, the disclosure on the phenomenon, I don't think it matters anymore if they disclosed or not, because I think we're in the fourth turning and their time is up. And they can either choose the easy way or they can choose the hard way, and they're choosing the hard way. And based on the topic we talked about with Lynn Buchanan a little bit earlier, we know how the hard way ends. So it's just a lot more people are going to die before the hard way starts. So anyway, I think now is as good a time to end this episode, and then we can
on this cheery note.
on this cheer. Well, actually, that's a good point. Thank you for checking me on that. Let's end on a positive note. You and I were discussing a little bit about the nature of reality before this call. It's not all doom and gloom. Mm-hmm. Part of this is kind of like a gauntlet, or it's meant to kind of test us, purify us, make us better souls, for lack of a better word. And these challenges, in terms of how consciousness persists, we're learning and we're becoming stronger, more resilient. And in the end, there's a positive, thing to look for. So the trials and tribulations of life only make us stronger.
I think so. I really do. And I think that this isn't something I can prove, but it's something that I just believe, and it doesn't, not important to me that anyone else believe it. But I do believe that we choose to come here, that we choose the life, and that we come here for a reason, to learn certain things and to do things. And I joke with my friend Jay all the time about how I'm like, you know what, I would choose to come to Earth right now. Like, this is I would absolutely choose hard mode.
But I don't know if I would choose easy mode, but it hasn't been easy so far.
Right.
But that's actually exactly what Grant Cameron would say. We're in the Super Bowl. That's what he would say.
I love that.
So thank you, Kelly. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we'll continue this discussion and others on the next episode.
Thank you so much. It's been a blast.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They have a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.